Okay, I am going to call us to order. It's 7:39.
JC, it's 6:39. We're an hour ahead in Michigan.
Thank you for that. I was, yes, thank you, 6:49. I forgot it in a different time zone. There's no citizens to comment. So Shama let us know that she has some very draining life circumstances happening. She will no longer be able to assist us as our secretary. She's going to give us more of a formal resignation when she has a chance. But unfortunately, that also means that we do not have the May, June, or August minutes to approve this meeting. So if somebody could please make a motion to table the approval of the minutes.
This is Martha. I'll make a motion to table the approval of the minutes from the 3 meetings listed on our agenda.
This is Natalie. I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion anyone wants to have before we move into roll call vote?
Just quickly to let you all know, I did ask her when sometime next week when she has a moment to send me an official resignation and then to send me all those minutes so that we can be prepared to get them approved at the next meeting in addition to this one. So I'll work on that when I'm back. And then also there was a gentleman who had applied for that position along with Shama, and then he also went through the interview process for the office assistant position. And I'm thinking about reaching out to him on Monday as well and seeing if he would be interested in this position now. Unless anybody has other thoughts, I thought I would start there.
I think that's great. And then if for some reason he's not interested, we could put a feeler out. In the meantime, I can go back to the video and do minutes for this meeting so we don't get too far behind. Okay, so we will roll call vote, tabling the approval of the minutes. Natalie Salee?
Yes.
Martha Gaines?
Yes.
Ida Nolan?
Yes.
Okay. That brings us.
I'm sorry.
Do you, JC?
Oh, sorry. JC Herman also votes yes. Thank you. I forgot about myself.
And JC, did you just say that you're gonna handle minutes for this meeting?
I'll do minutes for this meeting. I'm worried we're going to get far behind, and I think the minutes from this meeting are going to be really important for our next meeting. So I'll take care of that.
Okay.
We have no old business. And our new business, our first agenda item, is the statement that the REDI, the Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, will be suggesting to the board to put on the petition for the District 65 lawsuit. I'm not sure. I know Elaine is running late. I'm not sure, Natalie, if you know what time she's going to be joining us, but she had some really good input when I spoke to her about this.
I don't have a time. She's just dealing with transit.
Okay. Well, so just to let you all know, when I spoke to Elaine, she was very thoughtful in, she had done a little bit of research and had looked at what other statements had been made. She particularly referenced the PTA statements. And she very wisely pointed out that, because we're not an educational institution, that our role and our, point of view in this is different from, if we were an educational institution. And she was really emphasizing this idea of the Park District's responsibility is to bring community together. And that's what she felt the statement should focus on. She did have some suggestions that, hopefully we'll hear from her when she's able to join us. How do you all how does that perspective feel to all of you from, you know, writing this statement from the point of view of bringing our community together, because that's what the Park District is supposed to be doing, as opposed to like, you know, the statements that the PTA was making in terms of education?
This is Martha. I just want to say that I love that, because a personal goal for me lately is to focus on what I want to see instead of what I don't want to see, what I support instead of what I condemn. I mean, obviously there's a place for all of those sentiments at the right time. But there's also, I think, reason to be cautious of being too reactionary, especially when the basis is such nonsense, as is the case in this lawsuit. And so it's an opportunity for us to express very publicly and very clearly all of the things that we love about our community, all of the things that we want to see happening, and focusing on the, you know, critical race theory being taught in schools if we choose to get specific in ways like that. You know, making it clear that we want to see community building along lines of anti-racist action and all of that kind of stuff. And that way we're making it clear without explicitly coming out against the lawsuit in very specific wording that we're against the ideas that are being presented there, if that makes sense. So I'm agreeing with you in terms of expressing the things that we support and that we love and that we want to be for our community, and kind of not be the first voice, not be the loudest voice, but be a voice among the rest, if that makes sense.
I think that's an important point of not being the loudest voice, right? Because in a sense, we don't really have any skin in the game. I mean, we do as parents, right? But like as a committee, this impacts our community, but it doesn't impact our organization immediately. So I think that's a really important point of like not being the loudest voice. I hadn't thought about that before, because I have a loud voice and I like to use it. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Natalie or Iden, is there anything you want to add to that?
See if Elaine wants to join us by phone instead of by computer, because if she, hey guys, if she, you know, if she's able to, she could at least be listening in and speaking, even if she can't be on video. I don't know if she'll want to do that or if she's able to do it.
Let me send her a text real fast. Oh, I also really liked, she referenced striving for Reverend King vision of the beloved community, which I really liked that. Okay, let's see what she's able to do.
I just emailed it to her too, JC.
Oh, thank you. So with those like 3 points being our focus, that, you know, not being the biggest voice, bringing the community together, and focusing on the positive, should we kind of bullet point out things that we want in the statement and then we can wordsmith it from there?
Sure. I mean, are you hoping to do that tonight, or do you want to work on that offline and then, you know, present it in some way, like at next Thursday?
I think that would actually be wiser, because my experience wordsmithing in groups like this can be very difficult.
Because I'm happy to do it, I just can't do it at this moment. So if we can wait till Monday, just
okay,
send it my way,
so.
whatever you've got, and I can put it together and have it prepared for next Thursday.
I think that's great, because we actually have 2 more meetings before we have to report to the board.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got time on that. All right, so far, we've got this idea of, bringing the community together. We're focusing on the positive. What else we want to make sure is in this statement? Are you putting a thought together, Aiden?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about, I haven't read the one from the PTA. Did you send that to us, or that was not something that we got?
No,
Okay.
that was something that Elaine looked at on her own.
So I like the idea of just, that we're there to support, and we are, I don't know, an opportunity, like that we're here if people need. I don't know. I can't think of. I like what everybody has been saying so far.
I think, JC, that's the only thing that I would add, which I think is probably a given, but I don't know how to word it, but just that we want to support.
Yeah.
Just Ridgeville Park District wants to be a support in this circumstance to anybody who needs it.
Yes. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't know how to say it. We're here.
And I think
Hi,
that
Elaine.
has to do with like not being the loudest voice at the table.
Yeah.
Like that's not what we're here to do in this circumstance, but
We're here to support and
to.
Yeah.
Hi, Elaine.
Hello.
And Elaine, I'm gonna give you a minute just to acclimate to the meeting, but I would love for you to share with everyone some of your thoughts about the statement, because I thought you had some really great ideas. I shared a little bit with everyone. You're in my conversation real fast before I let Elaine speak. I also want to add in there, I love this idea of support, for anyone who needs it throughout this. But I also, and let me know if you all disagree, I feel like it's important for us to say that we support our community in this equity work that they're doing. I would like to, if you all, and if the board thinks it's appropriate, to have the statement include that, like, not necessarily that we're on this journey too, but like, it's not just the school districts, right? Like a lot of us in Evanston are going through this work. And I think that's an important thing to add to the statement. Elaine, do you want to share some of your thoughts? Because I know you had kind of, you had like a series of thoughts that you had expressed in terms of the statement for the District 65 lawsuit.
Yeah. Well, I had the last time we spoke about this as a group, I believe, I was of the impression that the litigation was a First Amendment case. And so forget everything that I had to say about that. It doesn't have anything to do with the First Amendment, and any First Amendment case would have been as weak as I suggested. And I don't know that this one is any stronger, really. And I don't think that it's intended to be that it's really intended to be a lawsuit per se. The whole theory of the case is that the plaintiff experienced discrimination, suffered discrimination and retaliation because she was identified as a white person. She is a white person. She was required to, if you read the complaint, she was required to attend meetings with other white people. They were there because they were white people and they were speaking with each other. She is asking for $1 worth of damages. She doesn't contend that she experienced any pain or suffering as a result of being identified as a white person. One of the experiences that she singles out, and it comes up at a couple of different points in the complaint, is that there was an exercise where they created a color line. And they did the color line by everybody in the group standing in a line. And if you experienced certain things, you'd step forward. And if you experienced other things, you'd step backwards. And sure enough, you'd see the way that those issues broke out by race. And you would see the color line. Well, that seems to have been a very traumatic experience for the plaintiff I'm being sarcastic. I think that there's a lot of very serious discrimination that occurs. This doesn't have anything to do with it. And what it really is just to be blunt, I see it as a smear tactic. It's just something that's intended to whip up anxiety over critical race theory and hate. It's a divisive tactic, and it doesn't have very much of anything to do with with the actual lawsuit, with the allegations of the complaint. So, having said that, I think that I signed the petition. I encourage everybody else to do that if they see fit, having read the complaint. And I think that I recommend strongly that the Park District put together a statement. Now, there are some good statements that are out there that talk about the process in the schools, the process that's been put in place, and there's some, particularly PTAs have made statements, and they're good. And of course, the school district and the other defendants will be responding in the context of probably a motion to dismiss. That's what I would anticipate that comes next. And the motion to dismiss on the grounds that there's no real basis for the complaint. However, like I said, I don't think that's the issue here. I don't think that we're looking at something that's really intended to address discrimination. What we're looking at is more of the culture wars over so-called critical race theory. So, having said that, the question then becomes, what kind of statement makes sense for the Park District to put in place? And I think that the interests of the Park District are different from the school district or the other school district defendants that have been named in the complaint. I think that the interests are different from the PTAs and other education organizations that have responded to the complaint. I would encourage us to give some consideration to really speaking with a different voice. This is intended to be divisive. And there are going to be people that will be shocked and horrified because of the lurid way that the complaint has been drawn up. And people, the legal theory that it's based on is that there's something inherently unconstitutional about speaking about race or putting anything in terms of race. That's a very dangerous theory, by the way. If that were to gain any kind of legal footing, that would be something that would be seriously problematic in the efforts of the country to attempt to come to terms with its long history of racial division. So what I think is that there are people out there, there are many people who will be perplexed, puzzled, should they read the complaint. They wouldn't sit down and read the whole thing. They'd read excerpts, and the excerpts would be sensationalized. So I'd suggest that what the Park District statement address is unity, just the opposite. That this is how we come together. That this, by doing this kind of work, by thinking through our differences and how we got there, and our cultural differences and assumptions, and by working through that, that is how we become a responsive, caring community. And I really like the idea of using this as a forum, and it can be done in just very briefly, but by saying, no, this isn't about hate. It's not about division. It's just the opposite. This is how we come together. This is how we join together as a community. This is how we care about each other. So I would encourage us to think along those lines as opposed to trying to address the merits of the bill.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm sorry. It was a little silly because I can go back to the recording, but I was just like feverishly taking notes on what you were saying. I really like this idea of the unity and the work that we're doing is, I mean, it's bringing us closer together. This idea that talking about these inequities is pulling us apart is not what a lot of us in Evanston are experiencing, regardless of what our color is. And I agree. I think that's something that should absolutely be included. Because it is, otherwise our relationships they're not genuine, right? And that's what we're looking to do in this work, is be genuine within ourselves and within our relationships. So Elaine, just so you know, what we talked about right before you joined us was, I'm essentially taking some like bullet point notes of all the things we want included in the statement. Natalie will attempt wordsmithing it, and then we can go over what she puts together at the next meeting, so that we're not, using this meeting time to go over word by word. I think that'll be a more efficient way to put together the statement. Let's see, Martha, I don't know if you've had a chance to speak to the statement yet. Is there anything you'd want to add?
Can you guys hear me? I have headphones on.
Yes.
Okay. I do want to chime in with just an addition that Elaine helped me remember. I absolutely agree with her that part of the point of this lawsuit is to create division.
All right, Patrick's down there.
As opposed
Thank
to
you. Okay, bye.
As opposed to having merit on its own and truly being about a lawsuit. Sometimes lawsuits are filed simply to get attention or to take attention away from something, or to just create conflict and that kind of thing. And so something that is important to me is that I view this to be an attempt at a distraction away from the legitimate attention and effort and education and community building, et cetera, happening or attempting to be happening in our schools. Again, critical race theory and just teaching people who, as the lingo goes, are just beginning their journey of anti-racism and understanding the history of our country and the implications of that last up until today and into the future. And so, creating division is a goal of theirs, of course, but also like literally a distraction away from where our energy and our attention and our effort and our money and our everything should be. And so I view that to be their intent, and I don't want to give that very much play in whatever ways we can control for that. And so again, just focusing on, it all kind of ends with the same things I was saying before, just focusing on celebrating the positive, making sure that the words that we choose to share highlight, what is special and what is unique and what is, to be celebrated in our community, and making sure that our values are expressed as well. Because when you express your values, then it kind of makes it clear what values you don't share with things that are being expressed in the lawsuit and that kind of stuff. So, I'm really thankful that people have gathered together and organized to create this opportunity to issue statements in a collective way, because that is a way to get a lot of voices heard in an organized way instead of just one-off responses to this. So, I just wanted to make sure I shared that too. But so I think that was a whole lot of words to just basically say that, some commentary perhaps about how this is an attempt to distract away from what's really important and what we should be really doing. And then we can kind of go into the details of what those important things are, if that makes any sense.
I would suggest that we leave the merits of the case and the intent of the case. I would suggest that that's something that journalists are likely to do, not to mention lawyers that are handling the case. The case has already been alluded to subtly in, I can't remember whether the Washington Post or the New York Times, but it's out there and it's going to be addressed. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about it. And I think this is not that not that we don't say anything at all, but I think this really is an opportunity to show to people who are confused. They don't know what critical race theory is. They think that they're teaching it to tiny children, and it's this graduate school concept that makes people hate each other, that makes white children feel bad about themselves. They have all of those kinds of ideas instead of, and they really don't understand, and they're really confused. And I think that I would suggest that that's our audience, winning people to understand in a deeper way, and in a way that's exemplified in our park district, in our neighborhood, in our community events, how it is that we can come together, and how delighted that we are that that these efforts are being supported in our public schools through programming that really addresses these deep issues in ways that children in the community can relate to and understand, and deepen our values and and increase our cohesiveness, not the other way around. Because I don't read that when I'm looking at the debate in the press, which is typically where I'm looking at it. I'm not seeing that perspective brought out. And I think we have a real opportunity here. So, my 2 cents.
I would like to suggest that perhaps people could come up with, anyone who wants to, I'm not like mandating it, but anyone who wants to come up with some specific wording on their own timeline, of course, if there's anything additional, share it here too. But in terms of getting something to Natalie, if we want to weigh in collectively and have Natalie put that together, I think that's a good idea. And maybe that's where we already were. I know JC said she was going to send some things to Natalie. I would love it, Elaine, if you would kind of chime in with any specific wording that you think should be included as well, if you'd like to. And I will do the same. Because I think sometimes when it's in writing and one person can handle sort of looking at it and finding where we are all kind of saying the same thing and then put it together, I think that's a good plan.
I like that idea because then everything doesn't fall on Natalie's shoulders. She can kind of condense what we throw her way. Martha, I mean, I agree with you in terms of the statements of like why they're doing this. But I also, I liked what you said in the beginning in terms of focusing on the positive. I think that if we try to, like Elaine said, kind of explain why what they're doing is problematic, I think it's going to detract from our bigger message of what we're trying to say in terms of, community is, I mean, that is everything the Park District is about, right? And I so often attribute all of my community experiences at the Park District to Natalie. But my personal experience with the Park District has been nothing but bringing people together. And that's what it's been for me and my family, aside from my, committee work and my employment. As a parent and as, someone who originally came to the Park District for programming for my kids, that's what I fell in love with Ridgeville from the get-go, was this pull of community together. And I feel like if that's our focus, like nobody can point and say like we're doing something wrong, right? Like we are pulling our community together. We're hearing that our community wants to be pulled together. My personal experience in Evanston, and I understand that part of it is who I choose to engage with, but I would say that the vast majority of people that I come across want this community to get closer together. The reason it hasn't been done so far is because we're lacking curriculum like this in our schools. We're lacking the opportunities to learn how to make that happen. I think that's really what we need to focus on, is this idea of the Park District bringing people together and assisting in this work of getting to know each other better and terms of race and culture.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I'm realizing that maybe you all kind of took my words differently than I meant them. When I talk about the things that I don't like about the lawsuit, I'm not saying that we say those in the statement. I'm saying that those are, you know, problematic, and it's sort of like the basis for my argument that I think that they are trying to distract away. I mean, quite simply, if there is a focus on racial discrimination happening, and among other things, and then the next thing you know is that white people are saying that they're getting discriminated against, it's like, that's not, it's hard to put this into words, but just because they're alleging that doesn't mean there's any validity to it at all. And to give it attention in the ways that they're attempting to get attention is to give it validity. It's sort of like with children, how what do they say? Ignore the behavior you want to go away, instead of like fighting with the kid about it, and then they're just going to dig in deeper. So, I mean, I didn't mean that we say any of that in our statement, more that it just leads to focusing on the positive. In other words, if I'm alleging that they're trying to distract away from something, we then use our statement to talk about what we want the focus to be on, which is not what they're doing. It's what we want to see in our community. So I'm sorry if I was confusing there.
No, thank you for making that clear, because I misunderstood. We have 20 minutes before Dr. Logan's going to join us. Do we want to agree that we'll just, I took notes on kind of what we've talked about so far. I can get these to Natalie in a more legible form than they are right now. Each one of us can email Natalie with any, specific wordings that we think want to be included, and we can revisit this next week. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
So should we spend these next 20 minutes before Dr. Logan joins us, going over what we want to talk to him about? I'm sure you're not surprised. I have a long list of questions, and probably too many. So we can condense those down and, prepare ourselves a little bit more. Something Martha brought up that I think is important is, similar to when they were interviewing new board members, making sure that we are, as much as possible, giving each applicant the similar opportunity. So like same question, same order, similar amount of time, so that when we're, discussing them, we're not comparing, apples and oranges, we're comparing apples across the board. Do you want me to run you all through the questions I put together?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Wait for us to start. Okay. I do have them somewhat in an order. If you guys want to switch the order, feel free to tell me. I have a cool erasable pen I can use. So my first question is essentially if they would help us review what we've done so far. I feel like we're a little disconnected from the work that we've done, and I think that we need someone to help pull us together. My second question is what kind of training he would, or any applicant would see necessary for the committee and for the board, keeping in mind Elaine and Iden. I don't know if you know this, but there's a new board member. Morel is a new board member who came through in the most recent election, and Dan Coyne recently stepped down. So somebody new has been appointed to Dan Coyne's position also. So there's two board members who have not done the equity training that we did with Dr. Effiam. Martha or Natalie, can you please remind me the name of the new board member? It's escaping me right now.
The one we just appointed is Matt Rogers.
Thank you, Matt Rogers. So I think that's something important to address, is making sure that those board members go through equity training also. So my other question that would be tied into that is whether that training would be together or separate. My third question is how the applicant would envision helping us change the charter, policy, procedure, that sort of stuff that we haven't gotten to yet. Another question is the purpose of, and I guess more the purpose of engaging community, because, we would find out ways to engage the community once we started working together. See if they felt comfortable helping us to review the equity lens, make any revisions that might be necessary, and then have us go through a training on how to use the equity lens, guiding us in, if they feel comfortable, if they have, strategies and such to help us, because if we're going to go by the guidelines that Pat or that Dr. Effiam had recommended for the board, for the committee, we're down a board member. So we would need an additional board member, and we really should have some more community members on. I think this would be a really great time to bring in new community members since we're getting a new consultant, hopefully going through training again. One question that's really important to me is to find out, as the chair of the committee, what kind of support I would get, if there's going to be, suggestions for agenda items, if there's going to be suggestions for trainings and such that I should go to as the chair. I think that would be really helpful. And then essentially just kind of stating that, we're hoping to have a yearly evaluation in place, and that, whoever the new consultant comes in, I'd really hope that we would get a list of deliverables so we know exactly what it is that we're going to be working on, a set of goals that we should be accomplishing, and, where we should be at the end of the year.
Can I make a suggestion, JC?
Yes.
I really like all those points that you made, and it sounds like you have a pretty great list of things that we're looking for the consultant to do with us to kind of pick us up from where we are. Is it possible to condense all of those into one thing and say, here's what we would like to work on with you? Are you comfortable with these things? What additional would you recommend or bring to the table?
That is a much more concise.
Well, it's a lot of like yes and no, and I think his answer will be yes to all of that. But I think it's good to just kind of state it out loud very intentionally at the beginning that here's where we're at. Here are the things that we need help with at this point based on the work we've done. Just tell him what those things are, and then ask him if there's anything, if he's comfortable with that, and if there's anything that we didn't mention that stands out in his mind that he would like to add to that list.
Okay, that sounds really good, and a much more efficient way to go through this. Are there any additional questions or anything else that anyone else feels that we need to include?
I'm curious, JC, about how he works within like a committee dynamic. When we interviewed him the first time and we were interviewing consultants, it was very much like, we don't know what to do, help, right? We didn't really have any kind of jumping off point. We were being reactive to something that had happened. So I'm curious now, because we have done work, we have worked with Pat the past couple of years, this is a little bit different now. Now this is like, here's the committee that exists. We do want to expand, of course. We do need another board member, of course. But also, what is that dynamic? Like, are you only available to the chair? Can we each reach out to you? How does he like to just professionally like maneuver that relationship?
That's a great question.
I think I'd like to hear, maybe as an opening gambit, a little bit different from what we've been talking about. What would his vision be? Without discussing it further. Some of the things that we've been through, and he might have some good ideas about what those things have been anyway. What would he see as a role that we could fulfill that he thinks would be effective and productive?
You mean generally,
I think
Elaine?
Sorry, Martha.
Yeah, I was just trying to get clarification. Sorry, you mean generally, Elaine, in terms of just broadly speaking, the equity work that we do as a district?
Yeah, and an open question, maybe starting off with an open question as to what he brings in terms of a vision.
I just want to kind of piggyback off that because I think that's great. Like, how does he, and I'm saying he, but this I think is good for all of the people we talk to, like what is an equitable park district in their mind? What does it mean to be a park district and be equitable? Because it's not a school, it's a different kind of organization. Like specifically, I'm curious what it looks like to him to see an equitable Ridgeville Park District.
I think that's a good opening question. Because I don't think we know what that is. That's why we're here, right? Like, I like that.
I like it too, and it really kind of taps into a broad approach that I would like to see us strive for, which is that instead of focusing on what we don't want to be or what anyone might, choose to sort of take issue with us on, and then again, we're sort of in this position of just reaction or response, setting a goal that we better understand all of what it means to be an equitable institution, specifically an equitable park district, and using that to guide us in terms of what goals we have to try to reach that place, being that,
I think that's, yeah, I think that's great. I mean, not only to know what their vision will be, but also the step that they would see us taking to get there. I think that's great. Is there anything else anyone wants to add?
I'm just always curious, like what people's knowledge or experiences with the park district, like just generally, like what do you know about Ridgeville? Have you or your family, whatever, is whether it's in a program or concert or just like driving by the building, like do you have any experience or knowledge of the park, I guess?
And I was going to add, JC, to answer your question, I'm always curious what kinds of real life tangible examples of the equity work that they are either working on now or have worked on in the past that they think would be relevant to us in any way. I'm always curious about examples of that because I think it helps get to the details, the specifics, the what are we actually doing, type nature of this kind of work. And obviously, I don't expect them to give us specifics that would disclose private information or anything like that, but just kind of if they have anything to offer us about work they have done or are doing that has relevance to us. And so they may not have an answer to it if it doesn't apply or if it's not stuff that they want to share, but at least asking gives them an opportunity to kind of go there if they want to.
I like that. I think that'll make a little bit more tangible.
JC, will you just give us a rundown now of how the questions stand?
So we'll start off by asking what they know about the park district and their experience with programming, what their vision of an equitable park district, or what does an equitable park district look like? And any real life experience that would kind of share with us what he's done in these situations in the past. And then the list of things that we're looking for help with, reviewing what we've done so far, changing charter policy procedure, review, revise, and training on the equity lens, deliverables, and a yearly evaluation.
And then is that it?
No.
Okay. I was gonna say that's a good list.
That it is a good list. We've got a couple other things on here though.
Well, I liked Natalie's idea a lot. Sorry to interrupt you, of sort of sectioning out maybe what is more of a statement of what we're looking for, JC, as opposed to the things that are very open-ended questions where we can let them, because Natalie made a good point that some of them are more of a yes or no, or like, yep, I can do that for you type response. That doesn't really give us much. So it's still valuable to communicate that to them so that they know where we're coming from and what we're looking for. But it sort of seems like things are naturally dividing into two different categories. One being those open-ended questions where we're trying to tap into details from them versus the sort of statements of what we're looking for type thing, which can also be a prompt if they so choose. You know what I mean? To kind of talk from that, but they're not super explicit questions, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. So the list of what we're looking for right now stands as reviewing what we've done so far, changing charter policy procedure, reviewing, revising training for equity lens, having deliverables, having a yearly eval, getting more members and engaging the community are like, this is what we're looking for. And then in terms of questions, the purpose of engaging the community, which quite frankly, I could get rid of that question if you guys are comfortable with that, because I feel like we know why we need to engage the community.
Well, I think purpose you can get rid of, but I'm very much interested in like the specific ways that they see us engaging the community in the context of equity work, because I feel like it's one of, I guess, a few things that have been very missing from what we've been doing so far, and definitely in large part due to the pandemic, but also like we don't have a plan for that part yet, I feel like.
Okay, so I changed it to ways to engage the community. I'm, and you know, if you guys don't agree with this, I'm interested in what kind of training he would have, or he thinks at this point we might need. Clear that might change moving forward once he gets to know us more. But I'm very curious about what kind of training he thinks we might need. And then how he functions with committee work. Like, is he going to be coming to our meetings? Is he going to be available just to me? Is he going to be available to everybody? And then I think that's everything, unless there's something that someone noticed that I'm missing. I also, just so you all know, I did get a chance to talk to him yesterday. He wanted to make sure that what we were looking for was in lines of what he was interested in and capable of doing. And so I just kind of ran him through essentially what we've done so far, you know, what we're hoping to do. I will say that I told him I felt comfortable speaking for the whole committee that we're really looking to get work done, that we've been kind of idle for a little while, and we're really looking to get our feet on the ground and start getting some work done, was something that I expressed to him, because I felt like that was a sentiment that was very strong from the committee as a whole. You know, from what I said to him yesterday, he said, you know, he is interested and he does think this is something that he's capable of doing. I just want to make sure I let you all know that I did have, you know, this conversation with him yesterday. Is there anything else? Any other comments or anything? Okay. He should be joining us any minute now. And then just to let you know, I am just gonna, with each of the applicants, I'm gonna give them an idea of how, you know, how the interview is gonna go, you know, let them know we're, you know, clearly we're interviewing other people. You know, we've got, you know, a series of questions, and yeah, I've got some of that stuff written down too. I also just want to add that I'm really excited for this next leg of our work. I personally am particularly excited because I feel like I'm going to have a little more space in my life to attend to some of this, so I can do a better job than what I've done in the last year. I think particularly with this lawsuit that's coming towards District 65, that the work that we're doing becomes that much more important. And I'm excited for what this next year has to bring. I'm really hoping that we can get some work done and have this move in a really positive direction. All right, so hi, Dr. Logan. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Dr. Logan. I don't know if you can hear me.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you able to
Wait a
hear me
minute,
too?
can you? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
No worries. Even after a
Hello.
year of this, technology still does not do what I think it's going to.
I tell you, when it works, it's great, but when it doesn't, it's something to deal with.
Agreed. Well, let me take a minute to introduce you to the committee and the committee to you. This is Dr. Logan. He is one of our applicants for our consulting position. So Dr. Logan, just so you know, we have with us Natalie Salee, who is the program director at Ridgeville Park District. We have Martha Gaines, who is the board president. And then we have Aiden and Elaine, who are both committee members. Just to give you an idea of our wonderful committee members, Aiden teaches in District 65, and Elaine is a lawyer who, and Elaine, please correct me, that specifically works with civil rights cases, is that correct?
Yes, and education issues.
So I feel like we have a pretty good team going here. However, we are missing some guidance, which is why we were very excited to speak to you today. So to give you an idea, we have a bunch of questions, clearly, and we have some more interviews coming up in the next few weeks. We are going to do our best to try to make sure that each applicant has, a similar experience with the committee. Yeah, like I had told you when I spoke to you yesterday, we're really excited to get this work done. The last little bit that I'd like to add before we start getting some information to you, which is something I didn't express to you when we spoke yesterday. I am a huge fan of the Park District. My kids have gone there. I teach classes there. I've done summer camp there. And clearly I'm on this committee. I'm the chair of the committee. I'm really excited to be the chair of the committee to be able to get some of this work done. But I really felt the need just to express my love for the Park District before we got started.
All right, I appreciate that.
Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Dr. G. Lo Quasi Logan, fifth generation Evanstonian, born and bred here. I serve as the president of Logan Consulting Services, so we're a leadership and diversity consulting firm. I've been doing this work for the last, 20 plus years, working in a variety of industries, nonprofit organizations, mostly nonprofit and educational institutions, but also work with law enforcement, corporations, for profit, and others. Really a big part of our focus is developing what I call cultural competencies. And I think under that very broad general umbrella falls just a variety of topics, all the anti-racism and racial equity and implicit bias and microaggressions and inclusive leadership. And, I feel it all kind of falls under that very broad general category. So I've been doing this work for a long time. Part of what informs my practice is, particularly my work here at Evanston, is being an Evanston resident. I think informs what I do and how I view the work that I do, particularly here at Evanston. In addition to that, I'm a member of the Illinois Diversity Council, and I've been certified by the National Diversity Council. And I've been an adjunct in the Justice Studies Department at Northeastern Illinois University for, about 12 to 13 years. And that's a big, again, a big part that's informed my practice. And I've been very fortunate, I would say, and to have worked and lived in 23 different countries, or for like combined like a 7-year period. And that is definitely a big part of what I do and how I do it. I'm a father of 3 sons. Just sent one off to college. One's currently in college, and I got one upcoming. And I love what I do. This is what I do professionally, but this is who I am personally. And I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all. And just to say, having grown up in Evanston in the second ward, Ridgeville as a kid was like that was a far away, that was far away.
Dr. Logan, you froze. Is he frozen on everyone's screen? Yeah.
I can't hear him either.
Dr. Logan, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen on our screen. Let's see. Oh, here, you're coming back now. Now we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you all froze on me.
Yes, you froze on us too.
Okay, I'm not sure what you last heard.
Well, you were talking about you got sent one off to college, another one going, another one on the way. Oh,
Yeah.
well, it was far from the second ward.
Right. Yeah, that's what I heard last too.
Yeah, and just, Ridgeville has always been a part of my perspective and experience in Evanston. I've participated in a number of programs there. And, and actually, we do some rehearsals there with Greg Lumberg and Amy Osterman. They have West African drumming and dance classes that they have there, and I'm part of their programming. So I appreciate this opportunity and the possibility to work with you all.
Thank you. That was actually my next question, was what your experience with the Park District is. I don't know if you're aware of this, but a lot of people don't know Ridgeville exists, and they don't know that Ridgeville is separate from the Evanston Parks Division.
Yeah.
I think that's a big challenge that we have in our work, is just letting people know who Ridgeville is, much less like who the Racial Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee is. So that's really exciting that you have a good amount of experience with programming. So from your point of view, especially having had experience with Ridgeville, what is your vision for an equitable park district? Like what would that look like to you?
Yeah, well, first, I want to just provide a disclaimer, because in order to really answer, I think every park district, there's similarities, but there's also differences. And I would need to know more about you all specifically and some of the challenges that you all are faced with, some of the assets and opportunities that you're faced with. Because I look at this not just as like problems and issues, but there's many opportunities. So I would need to know more to speak about it specifically, but in general, I would say, equitable park district, I see it as community based first and foremost, not only providing services to the community, but kind of grounded and rooted in the community, responding to the community needs. I see community relationships being very important, communication, programming that meets the needs of and interests of different community members. I see community people having a voice and input in terms of what happens at the park district. Understanding you all have a board and there's lots of volunteers, so understanding there's lots of relationships and community involvement. But I see that as being very central and core to any type of racial equity work, any type of equity work at any sorts within the park district, particularly here in Evanston. I think that, I know you all serve your community, but as you mentioned, JC, there's, a lot of people in Evanston don't know about Ridgeville and really understand, even people within your district, I find, don't have and I'm not claiming that I have a clear knowledge base of who you all are exactly, but I just find that a lot of people, even within your district that you serve, don't have a sense of who you all really are and some of the services that you all provide. So I see it really being community responsive, and I see community outreach also being an important part of that. Not just not just services offered at Ridgeville, but how is Ridgeville present in the community, how perhaps our services provided in other areas based on, representing Ridgeville, but in the Ridgeville district, with community members that are within your reach. So I see all that as part and parcel of it. I see, as I was alluding to earlier, cultural competence being an important part of that, particularly as a board. I think as well, just from my experience, I find a number of organizations, I would say, I mean, I consider you all to be an organization, right, of sorts. And I see that a number are engaging in like racial equity work, but not necessarily understanding the commitment that's involved, some of the challenges that come with the territory. And I think that, with that, there needs to be a clear understanding of what any type of equity or racial equity is. How do you define that? What does that look like in policy, in mission and vision, in the budget? I think it's seen in all facets of the work that you all do. So I think there's a lot of development that happens at the board level, staff level, if you have volunteers within within Ridgeville. I think the cultural competencies and the equity is woven throughout every level and every fabric of Ridgeville.
What are some ways that you, and clearly once you know us better, you'll be able to be more specific, but what are some general ways that you would imagine us being able to engage with the community?
The general ways? You mean in terms of like programming? You mean in terms of, your outreach and your communication, or in what ways are you referring to?
I mean, I was envisioning all of it. I see programming as being part of it. I see the various forms of communication, whether it be, the brochure, the social media, even someone walking to the office and seeing someone face to face, just that overarching, outreach that we very strongly feel that we need to do, not just for equity work, but also just, in terms of, programming and such for the community. In the past, there's been, suggestions of like town hall meetings and, having book clubs and that sort of stuff. Do you have any additional ideas that would be, clearly more general, since, you don't know us as well as you might one day?
Yeah. A quick question of clarification. Are you all focused on, when you say equity, are you focused on, because a lot of people assume that that's racial equity, and that's not the only type of equity. So I just want to make clear, is your focus racial equity, or are you speaking equity in general across the board?
We've been focusing on racial equity. I mean, our
Okay.
committee is called Racial Equity and Diversity and Inclusion. So yeah, I mean, we that's what we're tackling for now.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I think as far as the process, again, it's really, I mean, I use the word stakeholders, but if you have a very diverse constituency within that you all serve, and I think it's really important to gauge, again, what their wants, their needs, their interests are, their capabilities and abilities, for the different types of services that you all can potentially provide. So I think it's a matching and a marrying of that, as opposed to you all, as a board and as a park district, just kind of creating what you do and providing what you think is going to work. I think it's really based, I call it, that's what I mean, community based. It's community centered. So yeah, I mean, as far as collecting, perspective and data and information, I mean, there's town hall meetings for sure. There's focus groups for sure. But I think a lot of it, in terms of you all being a park district and community, a lot of it is about relationships and more of an intimate level of communication. So I would think, as a board, as staff, as volunteers, you're really, getting outside of Ridgeville, and you're engaging with individuals separate from focus groups and town hall meetings and that type of thing. Because if we're talking about equity, then how are we hearing all the voices, who perhaps are not at the table? So that's why I mean the outreach, getting beyond Ridgeville, to then determine what kind of services and programs and et cetera that you can provide your community. So in terms of like gaining a perspective on that, again, yeah, I mean, surveys, focus groups, town hall meetings, but those can be tricky as well. So those really have to be structured properly. They have to be facilitated properly. They need to be focused, because those can be those can easily turn into a circus depending on what some of the topics are. So I think that's really important. And then once you collect that perspective or that data and that information in terms of community wants, needs, and interests, then you can tailor, the services that you all provide to meet those needs and that interest.
I really like that idea of, because it is, when it comes down to it, it's the personal relationship that you have with the park district, right? It's not what we put on Facebook. It's not what happens at the town hall meeting. It's what happens when you come to programming, or what happens when you drop your kids off of programming. That's what's going to resonate with people the most. I really appreciate you bringing that up. You and I had, spoken yesterday, and so some of this is we had spoken about already, but I just kind of compiled a list of things that we are hoping to do moving forward.
Okay. If you see me looking down, I'm just typing some notes, so I'll just.
Oh yeah, no worries. I need to turn the light on because the sun is setting, and I'm having a hard time of reading my notes here. So some of the things that we are hoping to do is, reviewing what we've done so far. As a committee, and as what the board has done so far, we are looking to review and make any necessary changes to the charter, policy, procedure to make sure that all of that is reflecting our equitable mission. We were given an equity lens by our previous consultant, so I think we would want some help reviewing that, seeing if there's any need for revision, and we definitely need training on how to do that. Because that's something that we didn't get. We are hoping that we have a system for a yearly evaluation, so that one of the things that we are really looking to do as a committee is make sure that when all of us are gone, and Natalie's gone and Brian's gone, that this work continues beyond us. So we want to have things like a yearly evaluation in place. A system for training new committee members and training new board members coming in. As I let you know, we do have 2 additional board members. We are really hoping to have, essentially like a list of deliverables or goals that we know we're going to be working towards over the next year. And like we just talked about, we know a lot of our work is going to be based around engaging the community, to make sure that all these other things that we are doing are reflecting what the community is looking for, not just necessarily what those of us on screen right now think would be best. Do you have any, comments or questions about that list of things that we're hoping for?
I guess my general comment is, I appreciate the focus on what's internal, because your previous question, at least how I heard it, was focusing on the community and external and outreach and and I didn't mention, of course, all the social medias and all that type of thing, but I really see that this work always beginning internally with like assessment, and whether if that assessment is you all as a board, staff, volunteers, an assessment of attitudes and perspectives and thoughts and ideas. If it's an assessment of you all, your board structure, it might be potentially the assessment of, again, policies and procedures and rules and regulations and all that type of thing, mission and vision and et cetera. It might be an assessment of the budget and how money is allocated and what does that look like. It might be an assessment of potential learning opportunities for board members in terms of where learning needs to happen. So that speaks to what types of training potentially might need to happen. The ongoing evaluation, I think, is really important, and surely there's an annual or yearly evaluation, but I think there's assessments that can happen within that annual evaluation to kind of keep it a bit more in real time, as opposed to just, I'm not saying you were saying only a yearly evaluation, but I'm thinking of other layers of assessment that happen in addition to or prior to just the annual evaluation. And as you were speaking, just the word sustainability is what came to mind for me. So just, and that really speaks to infrastructure. That speaks to, again, you all as an organization, not just a group of individuals, and the sustainability. So how is that, not only how is does the park district continue to run, but how is, there's a value that I assume you all hold as a board, like how is that perpetuated board to board and member to member? How is the knowledge base, passed on? And as you said, there's training of new board members, and you want a list of deliverables. I think there's a lot of input that people contribute to that to determine what that looks like. So, that's just a general comment on some of the things that you mentioned, but I really appreciate the focus on the assessment and really getting a clear gauge of where things are at, how they got there, to determine then what do we have to work with in order to move forward, or what is it that we need to move things forward in a better or in a different way.
Absolutely. And yes, that idea of sustainability, I think, is really important to us. This is not something that we want to live and breathe just while we're here.
Right.
It's someday I envision myself having other things that I need to do and not being the chair of the committee anymore. And I would love, whenever that happens, to be able to pass it off and know that everything is like packed up and ready to go for the next group of wonderful people who decide to take this work on and continue it.
Right.
So you had alluded a little bit in terms of, and I don't know if you want to expand on this at all, in terms of the kind of training that you feel the board and the committee should go through. You had mentioned, clearly, doing an assessment and going through all the other things, in terms of, what happens in the building, so to speak. What other, or are there any other kinds of training that you feel that the committee and or the board should go through? And do you envision that training happening with the board and committee together, or do you see our purposes as being separate?
Mm-hmm. Again, I answer this having limited knowledge, but I see, well, for me as a consultant, I would need first to understand, what do you all mean by racial equity? Because we use terms, but a lot of times we mean different things by using these same terms. So I would want an assessment of the previous training that's been done. But to answer your question, potentially, training in racial equity, potentially training in anti-racism, but there's also this notion of inclusive leadership. And I see each one of you all as leaders, and what does inclusive leadership look like on your board? So that would be a potential topic for training, is inclusive leadership. I think cultural competence is definitely one, because there's the cultural competence of an organization, but then it's the cultural competence of individuals within the institution of the organization. So that's an important one. And if I can just mention very briefly that there's, again, many different definitions of what cultural competencies are, right? And the work that we do focuses on, I would say, 5 pillars of that. So one, there's, developing awareness, right? And then with that awareness, how do we cultivate sensitivity to that which we're aware of? But then more importantly, how do we develop our knowledge base? So that's where, training comes into play. So there's awareness, sensitivity, knowledge. I would say almost most importantly is then skill development. Like, what does that look like in like what we do? Like, how is it improved? How is it more efficient? How is it better? How is it more accurate? How is it reaching our community more specifically? The skill development is really important, because cultural competence is not just an idea or a concept or feel good or an intent. It needs to translate into a changed behavior. And then lastly, the 5th pillar that we focus on that a lot of others don't, is the fact of motivation. So now that we're engaging in this racial equity work, but once things get difficult, which is inevitable, once it's hard and people are not agreeing, and if you're being challenged by the community, how are your individual board members, staff, and volunteers, what motivates them to continue to engage in this work and to move forward through the challenges? So I find the motivation is critically important, and that is anchored in, I don't want to say the business case for racial equity, but like what's the need and what's the value and what's the benefit of that to you all as board members? Because again, if you're a volunteer, there's something personally you're bringing to the work that you're doing, but more importantly, like as a board, as a whole, as an entity, what's the motivation to continue to stay together and to engage in doing the work moving forward? So I think cultural competence is another potential topic as an organization or as individuals. Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of pause there because there's a lot of various topics. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's something that I've been hearing being talked about more and more in equity work. I mean, literally just in these last few months, Evanston has, they're offering seed for families, and the teachers have gone through Beyond Diversity. And there's that first level of, developing an understanding of how to think through things, but it's a whole different ball game learning how to act on what you know. So I appreciate you recognizing that. Do you have any, real life experiences that you've had with either an organization that's similar to us or in a situation that's similar that you'd be able to share with us of, some things that you've done? Or is that just a little too, abstract since you don't know us so well yet?
I mean, it's abstract, but actually, if I can just add to your previous comment first, that I also went through the Beyond Diversity training through the district, and the seed training, so I went through all the facets of that through District 65. So I am familiar with their training and how that kind of rolled out, at least within the districts here in Evanston. So, I mean, I as an example, I would say I'll use a couple of very brief examples, if I may. One is the group of Enrich Evanston. I'm not sure if you've heard of them or if you're aware of them, but they were the board presidents and executive directors of four different nonprofits, arts-based nonprofits here in Evanston. So they're not a park district, but they're a nonprofit and they're a board. And so I did a 1-year racial equity training program for them, implementing a number of the things that I've just been talking about. So I won't kind of go through that laundry list again. But what I found with working with them that I didn't mention previously is the importance of defining the terms in which we use. So we had one of the initial parts to the first training was developing the language and a comfortability with using the language of racial equity. So and I often use the analogy of the word love. You meet someone, you develop a relationship, say, oh, I love you too. But then you find out, months, weeks, maybe years later that we had two different definitions of love. Or how you want love expressed to you is different than how I show it and that type of thing. I look at this no different than in terms of all the racial equity terminology that's being used. But do we mean the same thing by the words in which we're using? So with Rich Evanston, we had a clear focus on racial equity language and the definitions of those terms. So it was a 1-year project, and with the board presidents and the executive directors of each organization. At a different level, another board that I worked with, nonprofit, was the MacArthur Foundation. And with their board, I helped them to analyze the criteria upon which they selected the recipients for funding. So what we found is there was some bias, some discrimination that was woven into the process that was entirely unintentional. So what I helped to do was to help plan a training process and facilitate that process, upon which 30 different executive directors of 30 different arts organizations throughout the city of Chicago came together for a process upon which we were critiquing the criteria that MacArthur was using to allocate funding to their arts-based organizations. So I relate that as an example because I think about the process upon which you all operate, the process through which you communicate to the community, the process through which you develop your programming, and that type of thing. The last example I mentioned very briefly is I also did training for the board, the board of directors, and the board of trustees for Rotary International. So, so not the Rotary Club of Evanston, but the Rotary International. So with that, for both topics, for both groups, the topic was inclusive leadership. And it was because these are leaders of the organization. And if they didn't embody these concepts at the very top, it's not going to trickle down throughout. So I facilitated a process, a couple of trainings for the board of directors, the board of trustees, on the concept of inclusive leadership, so that they can begin to come to create a collective vision towards which they can then analyze the work that they've done and to decide how they want to move forward together as an organization. And based on that training, they voted to have a task force that was based on. So I facilitated this training, and they were going to vote to have a task force or not. So it's kind of contingent on the training. And I'm pleased to say, out of 30, I think, one participants, there was only one dissenter. So 30 people voted for, and one voted against having the task force, which they actually ended up doing based on the training and the whole notion of inclusive leadership.
Nice. I only have a couple more questions, and I'm going to go off script just a little bit. Committee, I do apologize, but there was a question that came up that I'm really genuinely curious about. Do you find that doing this work in Evanston is easier or more challenging because of like the Evanston attitude that like we chose to live here for a reason?
That's a great question. I find it to be both. It's easier, and it's also very challenging. And you know, that's one of those things that I think, particularly like as a park district, and considering who you all serve and the diversity of people that you serve, that's really important, and it's really relevant, because there's a certain assumption here. I think there's a certain attitude, there's a certain privilege that comes with, you know, whether if you're born here, you were a transplant here, but like the whole notion of being an Evanstonian, and that plays itself out, as I think we all know, very seriously in Evanston politics. And I see you all as I mean, you're not a political entity, but there's politics related, I would say. I'm not trying to project that upon you, but there's politics related to the work that you're doing, serving the community in Evanston. So that whole notion, I think, is very real, and it can be very challenging. But, you know, it's something that I think can be leveraged towards something that's positive, really towards engaging in some serious discussion and dialogue based on that notion. So if we all have this perception of who we are as Evanstonians and what that means, let's interrogate that a little bit and see how does that relate to the work at hand. So it's definitely a challenge, but I feel that and like my work with the Evanston Police Department, you know, I had 4 contracts over a 5-year period working with the Evanston Police Department, and I think that was probably my greatest experience of what you're describing here, with that aspect of every ward in Evanston and how that played out working with the Evanston Police Department. It was a great challenge, but you know, it was a challenge that I was up for.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's both a blessing and a curse, right? To have people have the Evanston mentality that they do. As a transplant myself, who married an Evanston native, it's an interesting conversation, I think, that gets had around our community a lot. So in terms of, you know, keeping in mind that the bulk of your work would actually be with the committee and not the board, right? So as the committee, we do the work and then we make recommendations to the board of what, you know, things that they should do. How do you envision your work with the committee? You know, so for example, you know, would everybody on the committee, you know, have access to you? Would I, as the, you know, chair, be the only person having access to you, or, you know, would I have access to you at all? Would you be helping, you know, not that I'd expect you to put together the agenda, but making recommendations for what goes on the agenda? Particularly as the chair of the committee, I'd be curious if you would have any recommendations for additional trainings that I go through, right? I'm not well schooled on Robert's Rules or the Open Meetings Act. You know, how do you envision your work specifically with the community in terms of our relationships?
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I think I didn't answer a part of your previous question in terms of would I work separately with, was it the board and the committees? Did you mention your previous
With the
question?
training, if the training would be separate.
Yeah, if I could just mention that, I mean, one, there's a logistical aspect of that, of like sheer numbers, right? But two, it's a lot of that is based on functionality, and I think there's training that is suited for both a board and committee structure. But surely there's training that's differentiated between board and committee, because there's 2 different entities, and you know, yeah. So to your question, can you give me, what's the size of your committee?
Sorry. We are all present today. So there's 5 of us now, and we're looking to grow. We need another board member, and we need some more community members.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I would see. So, I mean, that's a relatively small committee. I mean, that for 5 or 6 people, I mean, we would have one-on-one contact. I mean, for sure. But I mean, we would structure that. I mean, it's not a free for all, but we would definitely structure that. We would definitely structure that. But to have 5 or 6 committee members for the work that you're doing, I mean, and as one consultant, I mean, I would have direct contact with each individual committee member. With yourself, I'm sorry, Jason, you said you're the chair
I'm
of
the
the,
chair.
yeah.
Yes.
So we would have a particular working relationship as a chair, and that is, so that could be a number of the things that you mentioned and others. I mean, if that's from forming the agenda. I mean, I don't know. It sometimes I have found that I've come into situations where a committee ended up being restructured based on how things were assessed, or there was a different
Good
recruitment
point.
strategy. There was a different recruitment strategy needed to kind of diversify who is on the committee. So I think there's a number of things to be figured out, but to answer your question, this would be an intimate working relationship. I believe in collaborate. I see it as a collaboration. So I would be a resource to the individual committee members. I would surely be a resource to you as the chair. And I also see the relationship as, I mean, there's training and there's consulting, but I think of like, and I kind of use this word loosely because it means different things to different people, but as a coach or a mentor, because it's really guiding, it's helping to create a process, but it's really helping to guide you through the process as the chair. But in order for me to do that, I would need to be informed as to the best way that I can serve in that capacity. So yes, that might be micro aspects such as informing what the agenda is, or the structure of the meeting, or the communication process through which the committee is communicating within the committee, or the committee to the board, or committee to the community. It could be things such as that nature. So there's a lot of ways that it can roll out, but I just wanted to highlight that for me, it's a collaboration. It's a working relationship. It's intimate, and it's centered and based on what your needs are as opposed to what I think you all want. So I don't come in with a prepackaged program or understanding of what you all have. So I would need to learn first in order to see how to best serve you all. But surely, as the chair, we would be working very closely together throughout the process. But having a small board committee, I would be working with individual committee members as well. And I don't know if you have subcommittees within that. I mean, that would be something as well that potentially would structure working relationships and
Can I add something, JC? Is
things
that
like
all
that.
right?
Absolutely.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done, but I think there was a little bit of a tech delay there. Just to add to this question that JC asked, Dr. Logan, I wanted to just share with you that the way the committee has been set up so far was in large part because of the advice and consulting that we got from Dr. Effiam. We can make changes so we can become a larger committee. I don't think it quite makes sense to become a smaller committee because that would mean like letting people go. But I mean, everything is flexible, and in fact, we even have some specific questions about some of the details that were recommended to us for committee formation by Dr. Effiam. And so that's right off the bat something that we'd want to be asking the consultant for some advice about in order to possibly make changes or otherwise keep it how it is. Just a better understanding also of why a committee should be structured the way that it should be structured. Some goals too for the committee versus the board, and understanding the role too that the committee plays in regard to informing the board of the things that we talk about and the things that we recommend, and making sure that we involve the board in the ways that make sense. But it's our understanding that the committee obviously focuses on and meets more frequently solely about these issues that the committee was formed to focus on. But it's important to me, being a board member and on the committee, it's important to me that the committee keeps the board fully updated. And so we could just definitely use some guidance there still in terms of exactly how we formed the committee and why, and making sure we all feel good with it moving forward. We're open to changes. And then specifically in terms of access to you, if you were to be our consultant, to flesh that out a little bit further, and just so you know what we've been doing so far, which doesn't mean we have to keep doing it, but it's sort of a starting place at a minimum. We have been meeting every 2 weeks. There have been some exceptions to that, but our goal is to meet every 2 weeks as a committee, whereas the board has one monthly meeting. And it was a goal of ours to have our consultant attend those meetings with us, and at certain points in time also attend the board meetings. So that right there would be like 3 meetings a month. And so I want to stress that it doesn't have to be that. But I personally feel that the more involvement, one-on-one, or at least committee to consultant, it doesn't have to be one-on-one, but committee as a whole to consultant, to me, it is really important, because I think no matter what, a lot can get lost in communication if only one person is interacting with the consultant, and then it's all on that person to bring it back to the committee. Now, if that person is JC, I know she'll do a great job. Absolutely. But we all have to think about what we're building for the future, not just who we are as individuals and what we're good at or not good at. You know, we really need to build this for being sustainable and for being as readily accessible to the future people who step into these roles as well. So, you know, everything is flexible is what I'm trying to say, but more access to you and more involvement with you directly is better than less. And that can certainly factor into what kind of a price tag, you know, for lack of a better word, you put on your consulting services. Also, what we focus on in this budget year, you know, we go from July 1st to June 30th. So we're already 90 days into the budget year. What we focus on this year might be very different than what we've been focusing on. It will also maybe be very different than what's on the horizon next year. And we would, I mean, again, maybe I should speak for myself because we haven't necessarily collectively agreed on this, but I would love to see us having some goals beyond just within 1 year, and you know, having a relationship with a consultant that could probably go into that second year at least. So yeah, sorry, that was just what I wanted to chime in with, along the lines of access to you, how much we get to interact with you. Certainly the bulk of what we've done so far, and perhaps this will be true moving forward as well, it has been in the context of us meeting as a committee. So that's definitely where we get together in the largest portion of time. It's where we discuss the issues in the greatest depth. That's where we generate the things that we then vote on that might go to the board in terms of specific recommendations. So from where I'm coming from, and I think everyone agrees on this, but they can chime in if they want to as well. Involvement in our committee directly, I think is probably going to be really important.
Thank you for clarifying that, Martha. Yeah, because it'd be at least those 3 meetings a month between the 2 committee meetings and the board meeting.
Okay.
Which all happen on Thursdays, just so you know. I don't know if that makes a difference.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Yeah, no, Martha, I appreciate that context. You know, you lended definition to what I was alluding to by saying it's a collaboration and it's an intimate working relationship. I mean, what you describe is essentially, by my definition, you know, that. And the accessibility is really important, particularly that you're a committee and that you're a small committee, you know. And to one of your other points, I had a client that I worked with very recently. They had an anti-racism task force, which is, you know, different than a committee, but there's some similarities. And there were 33 people on it. I mean, this is a pretty large organization, but there were 33 people on this anti-racism task force. And essentially, they formulated and didn't know what kind of structure they needed. They didn't know what kind of process to put in place. They had no idea really like what the goals were, the different opinions. I mean, there was just a general interest in people thought in terms of doing some of this work. So part of what I did was to create a process to help them figure that out, to help them structure themselves, to develop goals that were relative to what it is they needed to accomplish, some objectives based on those goals. So whether if that was a meeting structure, if that was the structure, if that was helping them to, if that was helping me to, if me helping them to create the agenda, if that was the process of communication and how they communicated with one another, that was even determining who was going to be on the task force or not, and based on what. So there's a lot in terms of the process of doing this work that I find a lot of organizations, particularly right now, there's a lot of kind of like knee-jerk reaction to this, to the events that happened last summer. And I know you all were on this before last summer, but there's a lot of that happening, and I just find a lot of people, committees, task force, organizations aren't prepared for the long haul, and they're not thinking in terms of sustainability. They're trying to do something real quick for a variety of short-term reasons, and this is simply not that. Not if it's going to be effective and if it's going to be real. And you all are serving real people, real community members who have very strong opinions and voices and needs, and that's what I mean. It becomes very political in that sense. So I appreciate, Martha, like some of the definition that you brought to that. And I understand I feel I understand what you're saying, and I concur, because there's a lot there. But it requires an intimate working relationship, because it is that it's a relationship, and it's not just coming in providing a consulting service. We would be forming a relationship, and which obviously that would need to be defined, but that's a process within itself. And I'll just say really quickly, I'll send you all the link to this. It's not totally relevant to this conversation, but I recently wrote a blog which was I think it was 8 common pitfalls to like DEI committees or organizations or something. And these were just like some of the common pitfalls that I found from some of the work that I was doing. So I'll send you all the link for that. Just kind of FYI, I don't know if it's informative or not, but one of the things was just the lack of sustainability. Like, people aren't thinking long term and like infrastructure building, and how do you sustain this work beyond the training, beyond this year's, beyond the consultant. Like, how do you sustain this beyond that? And I find a lot aren't focused on that.
That's a really good point, and that's something that we haven't brought up yet, is that, we, being the first REDI committee at Ridgeville, we are really looking to set this foundation so that at some point the committee will be functioning on its own, right?
Right.
I mean, not anytime in the near future, but to have not only that level of sustainability, but that level of understanding of what is supposed to happen and how that happens, so that this work continues, not only beyond us, but beyond having a consultant too. I think that's an important thing that we hadn't brought up yet.
Right.
I do have one last question.
Okay.
And then I will release everyone off to the rest of your day. What would your availability be? I mean, we are ideally looking for someone to be able to start with us, as soon as possible. Like I had mentioned to you yesterday, we are, kind of chomping at the bit to get this work done. What would your availability be to get started on this work with us?
Well, I would need to know more about what commitment is involved, right? I mean, so you gave me a bit in terms of the 3 meetings per month, but I would need to know more to be more specific. But in general, as far as my availability, I could, with the workload that I have and the bandwidth and all that, realistically, probably, well, let me back up and say, I see work beginning before like the first meeting. So, so when I say this, just keep that in mind. But I would think, say beginning of October 1st, because that's basically a month, 5 or 6 weeks away. But that allows time to get an agreement in place, to kind of do some assessment, which again, I would see the work beginning before October 1st. When I say October 1st, that's like, okay, here's the first meeting, right? But there's a process that has to happen prior to that. Now, I'll say October 1st loosely, again, not knowing, there's a lot that I don't know, but in general, I would say that. As far as 3 meetings a month, I mean, that's a bit, but it's not too much. I often say my schedule is full, but it's flexible. So with advance notice, I can work things in, and I like to structure it and plan it. So if we had a meeting structure, then I could guarantee that I could attend those meetings. If it was, okay, let's have this meeting next Tuesday, and in that meeting we'll figure out the next meeting, and in that meeting we'll figure out, like, I can go with that, but I'm just a lot less available with that because of other commitments. So the structuring of that is very helpful for me. But again, I would say, I don't know, 4 or 5 to 6 weeks, roughly beginning of October, I think that the work could begin.
Okay, and then just to give you an idea, our committee meetings happen the first and third Thursdays, and they start at 6:30. And then the board meetings are the second Thursday of the month. They start at 7:30. But the REDI committee, depending on what's on the agenda, generally doesn't start until about 8:30, until about an hour into the meeting. Is when the REDI committee is when I usually do my presentation.
And
Just to kind of
how
give
long,
you,
I'm sorry.
just to give you an idea of what our scheduling looks like.
And how long are those meetings?
The actual board meetings, it depends on what time of year it is.
Okay.
My report generally is 5 to 10 minutes, right? The specific REDI portion is pretty short. I will say, I attend the entire meeting because there's lots of other stuff that I need to be privy to. The meetings are generally an hour and a half or so, Martha. I don't know if you'd agree with me, unless there's something else that has come up. If there's like a policy that's being reviewed, or if it's the budget season, that's a whole different, right? That's like hours long.
I would,
So,
I would say that it definitely depends on what's on the agenda, and that is somewhat prescribed by what we need to do on a certain timeline every year, and the main one being the budget. So there are certain months where I can tell you right away that that's going to take up longer time. But, any board member at any time can add something to the agenda, and
Right.
then the discussion, will be as long as it's going to be. They've gone as long as 4 hours. They've been as short as an hour. I don't feel strongly that we would need our equity consultant to attend the whole meeting every time. I think it's probably going to be context based how much we would need you to attend. And I would think that it's also definitely a possibility that you wouldn't need to attend every board meeting, especially if JC, as the one presenting for the committee, feels that she's good to go and doesn't need additional support, or that we weren't asking you to speak on a particular issue, alongside JC. I would think that we wouldn't necessarily need you to even be at every board meeting for any portion of it, and that most if not all, would not need to be the whole board meeting. So in terms of total minutes, not that many. Whereas the committee meetings, I'd say, JC, what do you think? We've probably gone as long as 3 hours, but we try to shoot for like an hour, don't we? Isn't that
we've gotten better at making sure our meetings are staying shorter than an hour and a half. And then something also to keep in mind in terms of the board meetings is they're all recorded and posted on YouTube. So if for some reason something were to come up in a meeting that you did not attend, you could go back and watch the recording so that you could keep yourself updated. So that'd be another way to kind of cut down on how much time, idle time you'd be spending, so to speak. And then if, something came up, you could always go back and review the footage.
Right. Okay. Yeah. 'Cause I see that as part of the collaborative relationship, in the sense of, you all as the prospective client, surely you have to have a voice in everything, but myself as well as a consultant. So I see the collaborative part in terms of we come together to determine how many meetings I need to attend or how long I would need to attend those meetings, as opposed to, okay, we meet 3 times every month. Can you attend all the meetings? Well, maybe or maybe not, because it may not be worth any of our time for me to be there for all of that time. So I see that as part of like the collaborative process, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once you have a better idea of what we need.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's a great way to answer the question too, because the more we can plan it with a consultant as to what it is that we're doing, we would be able to foresee, I would think, whether the consultant needs to be with us at any particular meeting or whether we're on our own. And it's certainly always been a goal of ours that we reach a point of sustainability, obviously in the long-term sense of creating work that can be done by others when we're no longer in these positions, but even in a shorter-term sense, sustainability in the sense that we don't rely so heavily and so consistently on a consultant needing to be there with us every moment, holding our hand, et cetera. But I think we're in a stage right now where we definitely feel like we can use help setting some things up, getting some goals articulated, some timelines articulated. And then it's certainly a goal that we would be able to do a good amount of work eventually, if not sooner rather than later, on our own, as opposed to, needing your help every step of the way. But I think early on it might mean more interaction, and then moving towards less interaction in terms of total time. So
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, something you said just made me think to your question, JC, I don't know, maybe half an hour ago. But I've done work with different organizations on how to develop an organizational culture and climate of racial equity. And again, but I know you're a committee, but there's a lot that applies to that in terms of, again, I just think of infrastructure and infrastructure being critical to sustainability. And so there are some models that are out there. There's models that we work with in terms of how to help a committee such as you all to develop that for the sake of, longevity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really important, that longevity. I mean, the work doesn't mean anything if it doesn't live past tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to add? Do you have any other questions?
We have lots of questions, but they're not relevant to unless we had, you all decided we agreed to work together. So I'll parking lot those questions. I think for now, just in general, like how long are you looking for potentially a working relationship? Are you thinking like a 1 year project? You looking for like 18-month, 2 year, open ended, or how are you looking at that?
I think, and please correct me, anyone else on the committee if I'm wrong. I think we were looking to start with a year, and then at that point reassess and see what we wanted to do moving forward. I think part of that is because the park district works on a yearly budget. So we would not, and Martha, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we could not commit to any sort of funding past the fiscal year because of how the park district functions, right? It's not like even just like a regular nonprofit that can, plan their spending further. And Martha, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of how the budgeting would work.
Yeah, so unfortunately, historically, the park district, in my total 6 years of experience so far, and from what I've heard, has not done any strategic planning financially that, or in any other way that goes anything beyond the given budget year. Part of that is because, as JC said, we can't literally plan for a budget that hasn't been set yet by taxes and all of that. But that being said, it's not usually significantly different from year to year what we're able to spend in any one category, as long as the category is inherently designed to be ongoing. So, if we put in new park equipment at a given park, and if we spend $30,000 on that, then obviously we're not going to spend $30,000 on that park the next year because it already just got done. So equity work is a totally different approach, whereas we've already talked about, this is ongoing. I mean, we're not viewing this as like, oh, I think we have a year or two more of equity work, and then that's that. It's the opposite. It's ongoing. So, unless something significant happened that meant that our overall budget was super reduced and we had to just start cutting things, which isn't likely to be the case, we would be working with roughly the same amount of money moving into the next year. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, but our goal is certainly to continue equity work. Part of actually what we're looking for as well, speaking of the budget, is more guidance as to, and I don't know if this is a good fit with you or not, but more guidance as to how best to spend our budget dollars in the realm of equity. So obviously paying a consultant is one example of spending those dollars. Additional trainings is another example of spending those dollars. If we want to literally just plan and fund community events that are a way to, engage with the community in a face-to-face way, that's another example. But we'd love to kind of brainstorm and talk about additional ways that we can use funding to, to the purpose of equity. So that's an aside. But in terms of planning long-term, the easy way to answer you would be this. We would definitely want to shoot for at least 2 years, but we would make a contract based on 1 year and then basically, I think, tweak it as needed for the following year and kind of then deal with that as a 1 year entity, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, that does. Thank you.
Mhm.
Just a couple of quick questions. I know we're short on time here. So, or a quick comment first, Martha, to your point. I would see. I know you didn't. This wasn't a question per se, but kind of like spending. I see that as kind of based on the values that you all hold, based on strategic plan, based on your goals, and based on what your vision is. And I think that's kind of like you develop some guidelines upon which you develop a lens through which you look at the budget to then determine how money is spent, if that makes sense. But my question is, one of the quick questions is, how many board members do you have on the committee?
For the actual elected board of commissioners, it's a total of 5.
On the board, but
Oh.
then right now we have 1 board member on the committee. Dr. Effiam's recommendation is that we have 2, and we did up until recently. Debbie Braun recently stepped off the committee.
Okay.
Right, and Dr. Effiam had said, like her recommendation, correct me if I'm wrong, JC, it was at least 1 staff member from the Park District should be on the committee. Not at least, 2 board members, so no more than 2 and no less than 2 should be on the committee as well. So 2 of the 5, that is. And then the remaining spots on the committee were for, this is where I can't remember exactly what it's supposed to be. Is it supposed to be a total of 4 or 5 community members? JC, do you remember?
My recollection, I have to go back and look at my notes. My recollection, it was 6 to 8.
Oh,
community
okay.
members.
Yeah, maybe.
Natalie, do you remember?
It's on the
more specifically?
website.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay. And other quick question, is this part of your strategic plan? Of the board?
We don't currently have one. So, I mean, we don't have a strategic plan per se, and we also have not historically planned financially, even loosely, into the future much beyond any given year, at least not that I know of. Sometimes we know that like a roof is going to need to be replaced. And so, our executive director keeps track of those things and sort of makes a mental note that certain things will need to be budgeted in the coming year. But we don't look too much more forward than the year we're in and the very next year. And we have talked about trying to do more strategic planning. And so, it would be great for anything literally that is more of a long-term approach, as well as more of a large overall cost to be able to plan for what we do year 1, year 2, year 3,
Right.
Having more of a 5-year plan. And so it is a goal. It's not currently being done.
Okay. And last 2 questions. One, what is your budget for doing this kind of work? And just to qualify that, I'm not asking so that I can match, what your budget is, but I've worked with a number of groups who want to do A, B, and C, and they simply just don't have the budget for it. So I just wanted to get a sense of what your budget is for this kind of work.
Natalie, I think you had the number that you were kind of like setting aside for sort of a max for the consultancy part of it, at least. Do you remember what that total was?
Yeah, it's 10,000.
Oh, 10,000. Okay.
Okay.
And then Dr. Logan, just to let you know, the previous parameters that were set up is no more than 2 board members, no less than 1 full-time staff member, and not less than 3, but no more than 5 Ridgeville Park District residents is the way it's worded on the website.
Okay.
And then just so you know, along those lines, just a reminder that our committee meetings and the board meetings have all been recorded. So you can always go back and, look at those on YouTube if that's something that you're interested in getting a little more information on.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. And the last question is, and I want you to take this in the right spirit. It's strictly inquiry. It's not issue based. But I met with the board. I think it was 2 years ago. I think, and some of you are on the board at that time, and you all decided to work with another consultant, which is again your prerogative and totally fine. I'm just curious what brought you back around to reaching out to me, considering that you went with another consultant.
Martha, I'm going to let you answer that question because I wasn't in a decision-making capacity at that point.
Sure. So first of all, even though I should remember every single detail, it has been 2 years, and so I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if I remember everything correctly. I do remember meeting with you and Natalie, and I think it was just the three of us in her office, and we were talking to you about all kinds of details about very timely things in terms of things that had just happened, things that were being discussed in the community relating to us, some internal issues as well with certain board members. We really did not know even what we were looking for at that time. It was very clear. I mean, it's even more clear now looking back than it was at the time, how little we understood what we were even trying to do and why, and long-term goals and stuff like that. And that's probably because of the nature of being so reactionary to certain allegations and claims and issues and stuff like that were going on, as opposed to working on equity work for the long term, and because it's the right thing to do, and because it's consistent with our values and our commitment to the community. I mean, those are the reasons that we're here today. But the reasons that this all started were very different. And I don't really want to go down that path too much right now because it's not even really relevant anymore. And because our efforts and our energy and our dollars and our time are really more focused on trying to work on equity in the ways that all institutions should work on equity, as opposed to again, super specific time related, even just individual person related issues that have come up. Obviously those need to be dealt with whether we like it or not, but those aren't really the issues that we're facing at the moment. We really more want to if there was such a thing as here is the handbook of what every single institution should incorporate, and I know that that doesn't exist. And I also know that, a tailor-made approach to small organizations that are community-based is just the right way to do it, and the way that fits the best, whether we like it or not. And it's not that I don't like it. It's just that I will admit as an individual that I like things to be very crystal clear and to understand exactly what to do and why, and then go do it. And some of this stuff is more discussion based and more work it out as we go and get to know us, get to know you, that kind of stuff. As to, to get more towards answering your question, we met Dr. Effiam after we started the process of talking to consultants. So we talked to you, we talked to the YWCA Equity Institute, and we talked to another entity called Blue Sky.
Mike
something.
Simmons.
What's that? Mike Simmons. Yeah.
Mike Simmons.
And we definitely saw, all kinds of benefits about everybody's approach. It was actually interesting that there were also market differences. And, again, this is where my memory gets a little foggy. But after talking to all three of you and having you come and speak to our board, we did receive proposals, written proposals from the Equity Institute and from Mike Simmons. And I'm pretty sure, Dr. Logan, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we got a proposal from you. No. And I think we talked about it. And then I do remember you saying that what you are more in the habit of doing, the way that you do the work that you do, is that you put a ton of time and effort into these custom-made solutions for the institutions you work with. And it's not quick or easy for you to kind of whip up a proposal the way that some people may do based on having more of a structure where it's kind of a cut and paste kind of approach. And I don't mean that to direct that at anyone or say that critically. I just mean that you made it clear that if you were going to be putting in that work for us, it would be because you thought we were moving forward with you. And because we hadn't gotten that far in our decision-making process, I think it just kind of ended there. It's not that we didn't choose you, but we did. We were looking forward to the proposal from you, and then I think you chose not to submit it ultimately. So when we started resurrecting this idea of looking at consultants again and kind of seeing who we're going to work with in the future, it was our marked positive experience with hearing from you initially that made us interested in talking to you again. So in other words, even though we didn't end up working with you, there were many reasons that we wanted to at the time. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and how my memory serves me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And did I answer your question fully? I mean, if there's anything that's lingering, feel free to ask me.
No, I think you answered it, yeah, very well. I was just, like I said, I didn't have any issue with that. I was just curious. That's all. But no,
Okay.
I appreciate that. Sure.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, that was all. I mean, like I said, if we were to work together, there's a package of other questions. But for now, I mean, I think you all provided a lot of information and you answered all my questions. So I don't have anything more for the moment, other than like, what's your next step? I mean, in the process.
I was just going to talk about next step too. And JC, I'll turn it over to you. But one thing I wanted to make sure we included, I don't know if you went over this with Dr. Logan yet or not, is that it might be a good starting point to best understand what we've worked on so far and in what ways, and kind of analyze that in terms of seeing if you even agree with it and want to use it as a foundation from which to, add, or if you see very specific things that you might want to change and sort of give us the reasons and we start there. So I would recommend, and I think JC agrees with this, but she can, tell me tell us how she feels about it, that we sort of submit everything that we've ever kind of put together ourselves or got from Dr. Effiam, all of the guiding documentation that we've worked with so far, share that with you. JC also and Natalie can direct you to the equity page on our website that Dr. Effiam helped us put together too, because that's another piece that we should evaluate, analyze, see if we agree with it or if we want to make changes moving forward. Do we still feel good that that's the basis that we're putting out to the community, or do we want to make changes? And then, certainly any changes that you would recommend, I would view as definitely some early steps in working with you. You know what I mean? That would be sort of the beginning of working with you, is analyzing what we've done so far, making any changes that we need to make, discussing all of that, understanding all of that, and then moving to the next stage. And you know what? If it makes the most sense, this isn't ideal for our budgetary needs, but it might be possible. So I actually don't even want to formally say this, but it might be possible that we work in phases, and that we come to an understanding of what it is that we want to work on, what you'll charge us to do that work, and then achieve that on a certain timeline, and then sort of move to the next phase. When we set an amount in our budget, we need to spend it. And the more specificity we have before that budget is even finalized, the better, because then we know, again, the park equipment is a good example. If we know a park is really old and that's the one we want to replace, we have Brian do some research about new park equipment, get the costs, come up with a few options. We can say we like option A better than B or C, and then we know exactly what that's going to cost us. We buy it, we put it in, that kind of thing. So the more we can do that with you, the better. But you're going to have to maybe tell us if you think you're able to say, here's what you need to do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, within this time period, which is remaining about, 10 and a half months, if we're already a month and a half into the year. And so, JC, again, chime in, please. But in terms of next steps, I think there might be a stage where we give you everything that we can document. You can look it over. You can ask us any questions. We can also sort of put maybe a finer point on those meetings and times that would need to be sort of, at least in the early stages, meetings that you attend and are involved in discussion with us. And then we can maybe see if there's anything else specific that we want to include. And I think, JC, you started us off actually with some of the details. My mind is running blank at the moment, but some of the details of what it is that we want. Perhaps we could put that in writing to Dr. Logan so that he can see this is what we want, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and sort of use that as a way to craft an approach and a price and a timeline, that kind of stuff.
That sounds like a good idea. And that way you'll have, something a little bit more concrete to work from. The only other thing that I would add is more in the short term is we do have some other interviews set up in the coming weeks. We plan on having an executive session in 2 meetings from now, so like 2 weeks from now, where we will, discuss everyone that we interviewed, and we'll be making a decision after that. And then we'll be making a recommendation to the board for that second week in September. We're hoping to have a recommendation of 1 or 2 consultants to meet the board, because the board is the one that gets to make the final decision, right? We're not a decision-making body by any stretch of the imagination. So we will bring to the board who we think is are the best candidates. And then they're the ones who will be making the final decision.
Okay. That makes sense. Makes perfect sense. And Martha, to your point, yeah, that would be part of my assessment process, is to whatever I'm privy to seeing from your previous everything. That's all. I mean, very, very important. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Logan.
All
Yes,
right,
thank you so
It's
much for your
Natalie,
time.
sorry.
Sorry to keep you so late.
It's okay. It's probably comes with the territory, but it does. But thank you for reaching out. Thank you for your time and for what you shared, and for considering me. And I'll look forward to hearing from you when I do, in a few weeks, perhaps.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is Natalie Salee. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Martha Gaines, I second.
All right, I will roll call the 3 of us out. Natalie Salee,
Yes.
Martha Gaines,
Yes.
JC Herman, yes. Thank you all for sticking it out. Looking forward to chatting with you all in the future.
Thanks.
All
Talk
right.
to you
Good night,
soon.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.